Well, good afternoon, everyone. Bill Rentschler in the 1011 Now streaming studio. Um, Starting off another brand new streaming segment this Friday afternoon. This is a weekly segment you're hopefully going to see every Friday, Friday afternoon, in cooperation with the FLATWATER Free Press, which is a nonprofit news organization here in Nebraska, and they put out a bunch of really, really good content. And so every week we're going to, again, have a chat with the author or the writer of kind of some new content that's been coming out from the Flatwater Free Press. And this week we have a really interesting story to talk about. And so we're going to bring in author Sara Gentzler. Sara, how are you doing today? Thank you very much for joining us today. Can you kind of tell us a little bit of your background and kind of how you came to be where you are right now?
Sure. I grew up in Nebraska, and after college, I moved away. I worked in Washington State for a while as a reporter, came back to work at the World Herald um, a couple of years ago, and then eventually took a job here at Flatwater Free Press. At the World Herald, I was a state government reporter, and here I am the state government watchdog reporter. So some of the same sort of work, but really with a focus on accountability.
And this latest story that you published, certainly, again, it is a really brilliant piece that you put together, a very
Thank you.
long piece. Can you kind of take us into some of the details? So I guess basically there's a state program, a crime victim reparations program that, for people who've fallen victim to horrible, horrible things, this is a program that's supposed to try and make them at least a little bit whole again.
That's right. Yeah, and states across the country have these the same or similar programs. The idea is that if somebody is a victim of a violent crime or the loved one of maybe someone who was killed, for instance, they can apply to this program to have certain expenses that are related to that crime reimbursed. So after the fact, maybe they decide to apply to have counseling paid for or to have funeral expenses reimbursed or medical bills reimbursed that weren't covered by insurance, or if they're uninsured, have those bills covered. So that's the idea, is just to basically, like you said, help make them whole for expenses that in an ideal world they would have never had to pay.
And so, with this article that you wrote, and we'll go ahead and pull it up so you can see the article here. It centers kind of around, and I hope I say her name right. Is it Kulelani Zalapani?
Perfect.
who,
Yeah.
who was a mother whose son was killed in a home robbery. Can you kind of take us through Kulilani's story and kind of how you connected with her and her process of going through this program?
Sure. So Kuleilani, her son was 17 years old and living in Bellevue. From what I understand, some like a group of guys, maybe a few people broke in. He, in the process of a robbery, was shot and killed. Um, what Kuleilani wanted from this program was some of his funeral expenses reimbursed, and the cap on funeral expense reimbursement from this program is $5,000. So she was applying for the maximum amount, and then so the way this program works is they apply. There's a staff member who looks at that application and investigates, and then sends it on to the hearing officer. So that hearing officer was a man named Don Arp. He's head of the state's crime commission. So it kind of goes through those two steps. Kaleilani got a letter from Arp saying you've been denied. She then appealed that, and then the board that hears those appeals denied or affirmed his denial. Essentially, the reason that they gave was that they found her son was somehow culpable in his own death, which really, I guess I would say, re-victimized Kuleilani. Like, she felt that really hurt her to hear that. I think you asked about how we connected,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'd heard, yeah, I'd heard about some issues with this program, and then through my sources I was talking to, kind of asked, like, do you know anyone who would want to talk, who's been through this and might feel comfortable sharing their story? And that's someone at some point just said, you know what, I know the person who you should talk to because she's been wanting to get her story out.
Yeah, and so reading the article, it goes into basically this program. And you kind of mentioned it that they said he's almost some way culpable for his own murder because he had maybe been had like drug money in the house or something like that. But his mother was saying no, he has a part-time job. I can prove that. And again, it seemed like on the face of it, a pretty kind of for a program that's supposed to be, helping people who have already been victimized, a really kind of heartless decision.
I think that she would agree with you on that, and I think a lot of advocates would agree with you on that. It's difficult because as soon as you start talking about that, like, is he culpable in his own death, it becomes like you're almost trying to prosecute someone who's no longer with us, trying to figure out if he was somehow involved. And I think that too is another thing that was hard for his mom.
And so this program, again, Kulilani and her son are kind of the face of the story, but you obviously dug deeper into the program, and it sounds like Nebraska, again, maybe hasn't been utilizing this program as well as they should. You have a really interesting chart here. We'll go ahead and we'll pull it up full screen. Can you kind of walk us through some of the numbers that we see in this chart and kind of the numbers from surrounding states as well?
Sure. And like I had said before, I mean, these programs are all over the country. States do have the US DOJ, when I talked to somebody there, called it kind of broad latitude in terms of what qualifications, like how these programs are run. There's a lot of variability, but they have access to this federal money. They do. And so they have to submit certain information to this federal government every year. And that's where these numbers come from. And what you see is that Nebraska is just helping a small fraction of what surrounding states are doing. So if you look at, we used Iowa in the example because I think it's really stark, and they're right next door. Nebraska approved 118 applications while in these 2 years that this data covers, and Iowa helped about 5,700. What's not on this chart is also money, which Nebraska in this period helped. I have it up here in my notes. About $500,000. They spent about $500,000, and Iowa spent 10.4 million. So it's just like orders of magnitude bigger programs and helping so many more people in these surrounding states. Missouri, you're looking at 2,000 applications, while Nebraska again did 118. Kansas and Wyoming are both at about 1,600. South Dakota had a smaller program too, but still had like over three times as many people's applications were approved. The other numbers in here, I mean, I think even just knowing how many people applied shows that the program is operating at a much smaller scale. So Nebraska, they approved 118 out of 215 applications, where Iowa had about 6,600 applications, and they approved those 5,700 that we mentioned earlier. The other thing this graphic shows is the number of days it takes to reach a decision, and Nebraska's on the high end of how long these applications are taking to process too, which can mean on the ground that people are experiencing these long delays, even if they are approved, to get the money that they're waiting on.
And one state that you don't see on this graph, just because we're zoomed in, again, also I should say you can find this article on FLATWATER Free Press's website, flatwaterfreepress.org. It's also on 1011now.com. Again, it really is a good article. But Colorado, again, I thought was interesting. And again, it's an apples and oranges comparison. Not every state has the same requirements and things like that. But still, Colorado had almost 30,000 applications with just over 25,000 applications that were approved with just an average decision time of 31 days. Pretty incredible.
Well, Colorado's an interesting example, actually, because I noticed that too in the data. I was thinking that's a huge difference, and I reached out to their program and I learned a couple things. One is that they have this model where they have like a bunch of local programs instead of just this one state program that are kind of so dispersed sort of model. And then they also, I think the way they report their data is that they might give their applications or approve their applications in like installments, and so they might be counted more often in there, or multiple times for one person. But still, I mean, again, it is orders of magnitude bigger and operating at a different level than Nebraska's is for sure.
And so, also in this article again, which again you really dug deep into this. You reached out to local nonprofits who are victim advocates. Who there were some in the article that says, "Hey, yeah, this is a great program. We don't have any problems." But there was also many that said, I mean, that in the article that said, we don't even really send people to this program anymore because it's a 50% denial.
Right. Yeah, there was a few people who directly told me that, just that we stopped recommending people even apply in certain scenarios just because we don't want them to go through that and then be denied, and then they end up just looking for local help to say have them get free food, or they can put their grocery money towards the funeral, or sort of shift their budget around to pay for this stuff that's related to a crime. But I think also importantly, there's a survey of service providers across the state that says a lot of the same things. So it's not just a few people who have had these experiences. It's really kind of, by and large, advocates across the state are saying that this is a broken program.
And so you had brought up Don Arp, who was in charge of this program. He's recently resigned, I believe, after this article came out, which this article originally came out just about a month ago. And
Yeah.
the governor just yesterday announced his replacement. But to try and fix maybe what's going wrong with this program, we need the legislature. Is that correct? The legislature maybe needs to do something, or is it the Nebraska Crime Commission? How can we maybe try and reverse this trend?
It seems to me that there are several places that things could be improved. I obviously don't know the inner workings of the Crime Commission's office. I don't know what all goes into their decision making process. But hearing from advocates that, A, there's not the money there is one thing. And I think obviously the legislature plays a role in that. So does the commission in asking for the money. Then there's, along with money, there's just the law that determines who's eligible for the program. And what advocates said is that those rules are too strict for these complex circumstances that victims and their family members find themselves in. But then also they said that those rules that are already too strict are being very strictly interpreted. And so it seems like there's a lot of different angles that that change could come from.
So hopefully this article, hopefully us talking about this helps kind of shed some light on maybe the issues that this program is having. Which again, the program itself is meant, has good intentions, but maybe we just need to maybe streamline things, make things a little bit easier. Again, for people who are already going through a horrible situation. For KOLN, though, it sounds like as much as there could be a happy ending to this story for KOLN, it sounds like she did get money from a GoFundMe to help pay for the funeral expenses, and now she's been able to move back to Hawaii, where she's originally from, and anonymous donors even created a memorial scholarship for her son there in Hawaii.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I think that I think she's, just from talking to her, I think she still feels very wounded from her experience in Nebraska. But there, yeah, it's not all bad. She was really proud of that memorial scholarship, and I know that she is happy to be back in Hawaii, and so things aren't all bad.
Yes. All right. Sarah, is there anything that we kind of missed that you wanted to touch on? Again, how long, I guess, did it take you to put this piece together? Because, again, it's very in-depth. You talked to a lot of different people, a lot of different numbers. How long did it take you to put this together?
Well, so it's hard to say because my job, I always have a few of these things kind of going at once. So
Yeah.
I would go to it and then leave my focus would leave and go to somewhere else, and then I'd come back to it again. But a few months probably here and there, just and then focused on it really for a month or so to, especially it was during legislative session too, so there's so much to keep
Lot
track
going
of.
on.
There's so much going on. Yeah, but it's not a short piece, as you pointed out. It's there's a lot in there.
It is, and again, it's very well written. Again, I would encourage everyone to read it. Again, you can get that on FLATWATERFreePress.org. It's also lives on the 1011now.com website as well. Well, Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Again, it's a wonderful piece, and like I mentioned, hopefully, again, this maybe shakes some things loose, and we can, again, maybe make this process a little bit easier for victims of violent crime here in the state of Nebraska. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we may talk to you again soon. Again, we're going to talk to someone from FLATWATER Free Press every week. And again, you've got a lot of good stories, so I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Yay, I hope so. Thanks
All right.
thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Sara. Again, that was Sara Gentzler from the FLATWATER Free Press. Again, this is a new weekly streaming segment that we're going to try and bring you every Friday at 2 o'clock. So again, make sure you keep it tuned to 1011, again, for additional, interviews like this on some really, really good content. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in and for joining us today. Again, as always, keep it tuned to 1011 for all of the latest news, weather, and sports, and hope everyone has a nice Friday.